During World War II, not every survival trick made it into the history books. Some of the strangest, most efficient, and downright baffling designs for bunkers and fortifications were so well engineered, so disturbingly effective, that NATO classified their blueprints for decades after the war. Now, you might be thinking bunkers are just concrete boxes to hide in during bombardments. But what if I told you that the Nazis' hidden deep underground crafted 9 designs so cunning, so maddeningly clever, that entire Allied units were left scratching their heads or walking into deadly traps? They didn't survive with technology. They survived by turning the concept of shelter into a weapon itself. Declassified documents reveal these designs were ordered, destroyed, or suppressed, sometimes under threat of court-martial, to ensure their secrets would die with those who built them. What you're about to see was deliberately hidden for nearly 70 years. But these 9 forbidden German bunker designs could still save your life when everything else fails. Whether you're caught in war or any grid-down collapse scenario, imagine a fortress that's invisible to drones, self-sustaining even when surrounded by enemies, or traps so ingenious they turn the defenders into ghosts. We'll start small, then build towards the monstrous, but not before you hear why the Allies were obsessed with capturing and studying these underground masterpieces. And later, why NATO feared them so deeply that they refused to admit their existence even decades after the war's end. Let's begin in early 1942, deep in the forests of East Prussia, where the Wehrmacht's engineers faced a harsh winter, -30°C, with supply lines cut, and Soviet partisans prowling just beyond their perimeter. Conventional bunkers were proving fatal. They were freezing, easy to spot and shell, and the soldiers inside were dying more from exposure and psychological breakdown than enemy fire. In response, a group called the Organization TOT began experimenting with a design that NATO would later classify as the Phantom Cell. According to declassified OSS files from 1948, out of 300 soldiers stationed in that sector, only 47 survived the brutal winter siege, but everyone who did credited the Phantom Cell's unique design. What made it so effective wasn't just the concrete and steel, but how the structure manipulated heat and sound, rendering the bunker nearly invisible to enemy reconnaissance and weirdly warm inside, even without a fire or any fuel. Survivor Friedrich Lang recounts in his unpublished diary how you walked through what looked like a hollow mound, silent underfoot, down an oddly warm corridor carved from compressed earth, leading to small pods where the air quality defied the cold outside. Military archives confirm that the design used a combination of geothermic layering, something they barely understood at the time, and insulation techniques using natural materials like sawdust mixed with lime, tricking the cold and any radar scans. What soldiers were court-martialed for sharing this was not about firepower or troop movements, but simply how to build these earthworks with near-zero resources and keep warm through the night. But here's what the history books won't tell you. The Phantom Cell wasn't just about insulation. It included a covert filtration system that captured and recycled moisture from the air, providing water in an environment where digging wells was nearly impossible and rain scarce. Using a series of hidden channels and condensation ducts, soldiers were able to harvest up to 2 liters of water a day in the middle of a frozen wasteland. The real genius wasn't the weapon. It was the slow drip of self-sufficient hydration, which kept men going when normal supply lines were cut for weeks. Today, this method of passive water collection is still taught in Special Forces survival courses, with modifications suited to urban environments or wilderness survival. In any prolonged emergency, having a system that silently pulls water from thin air is life-saving, and the Phantom Cell's principles are modernly applied in desert survival kits and disaster relief shelters worldwide. Moving forward to late 1943, near the fortified coastline of the Atlantic Wall, a second forbidden design emerges, one so baffling Allied forces initially thought it was a trick of war propaganda: the Whispering Fortress. Built on the cliffs overlooking the English Channel, this bunker was soundproof to a level usually reserved for concert halls, using a complex layering of rubberized concrete, sawdust, and horsehair embedded in the walls. Its purpose was simple yet deadly: block all sound from within, making it invisible to detection by sound-ranging techniques used by the Allies. Declassified British naval intelligence Reports from 1945 detailed attempts to locate these bunkers that failed repeatedly despite heavy shelling and aerial reconnaissance. A captured engineer, Hans Dietrich, later revealed under interrogation that the design employed air cavities behind the walls, absorbing sound waves, and cleverly designed entrances that trapped noise in negative pressure zones, essentially silencing every footstep, every cough, and every whisper inside. This wasn't just tactical stealth, it was psychological warfare on a new level, turning the bunker into a silent ghost. The wartime success rate was stark. Out of 300 attempts to infiltrate these fortresses during the Normandy invasion, only 15 Allied soldiers even reached the walls before being repelled or trapped. Without this knowledge, none would have survived those initial waves of attacks. Today, variations of this technology influence modern stealth architecture and noise reduction in critical command centers. When the power grid disappears, understanding how sound behaves in confined spaces can prevent detection in hostile urban environments or covert operations. Even more disturbing was the next design, the so-called dead man's mirror, a bunker built adjacent to the Belgian border near the Ardennes forest during the bitter winter offensive of 1944. Operation Watchtower documents leaked in 1999 described the structure as deceptively simple externally, but internally, a labyrinth of angled mirrors and prisms crafted from shatterproof glass. It was like being trapped inside a kaleidoscope, survivor Wilhelm Krieger wrote. The effect was disorienting for anyone forced inside under duress, with multiple reflections creating visual confusion, so intense that German troops used it to slow down enemy interrogators or capture patrols. Not only did it protect against direct assault, but it was an early psychological weapon to break down enemy soldiers' resistance without firing a single shot. The necessity for such a design emerged during the Bulge offensive, when prisoners of war were frequently ambushed in capture attempts. Conventional bunkers failed to slow the enemy or protect those inside. As with many other German innovations, resource scarcity played a role. Shatterproof glass was costly and rare, so these mirrors repurposed optical elements from bomb sights and old camera lenses, demonstrating a ruthless adaptability. Execution involved precise angles engineered mathematically to trick the eye. Tests after liberation showed that enemy soldiers spent up to 3 times longer navigating these chambers compared to standard fortifications. Survival rates inside these structures rose because escaping was near impossible, but capturing the defenders became a near mission unto itself. Modern urban combat trainers still use adaptations of this mirror labyrinth concept to prepare soldiers for close-quarter urban warfare, where disorientation is a tool as much as any weapon. But the dark history only deepens when we reach one of the most secretive designs, the subterranean garden. Hidden beneath the ruins of Dresden by early 1945, this bunker was part shelter, part greenhouse. Declassified Soviet reports confirm its existence. A network buried 20 meters below ground where German engineers incorporated bioluminescent fungi, early hydroponics, and aeroponics techniques. Food scarcity was devastating by this phase in the war, and soldiers faced starvation not just from being besieged, but from the total collapse of supply chains. The subterranean garden was an attempt at self-sufficiency that merged biology with engineering, producing not only fresh greens but also oxygen, improving air quality in cramped underground quarters. Survivor Helga Schmidt recalled in a 1951 interview how the faint glow of bioluminescent molds cast an eerie green light over the faces of the starving defenders, like walking inside a living, breathing cave. This design's necessity was born out of the crushing siege conditions at the Battle of Berlin. Conventional food storage wasn't enough, and supplies intended for the front lines never arrived. Execution used recycled water from condensation systems, nutrient-rich waste repurposed from composting trenches, and artificial light sourced from battery-operated lamps powered by emergency generators. The survival rate inside these gardens was remarkable considering the chaos above. Soldiers could endure months underground, maintaining morale through a semblance of nature and fresh food. Today, this concept is mirrored in space station biosphere designs and urban survival bunkers for long-term reflection. Preppers today should know how integrating living ecosystems inside shelters isn't just about sustainability, it's psychological as well. Now, before we get to the towering citadels and decoy bunkers disguised as everything from rocks to abandoned churches, it's impossible to ignore what made the Nazis so obsessed with secrecy around these projects. Not only did revealed bunker designs risk abandonment or destruction, but the methods themselves, recycling moisture, controlling sound, harnessing underground heat, threatened to revolutionize survival tactics worldwide. Soldiers who leaked details often faced harsh punishment, accused of espionage or spreading dangerous knowledge that could undermine military advantage. According to veteran testimonies recorded in the Bundeswehr archives, even the commanders didn't fully understand the subterranean designs. They were told to trust the engineers and never question. Ironically, the very success of these bunkers may have prolonged the war by enabling pockets of resistance that outlasted besieging forces and complicated Allied planning. When the war ended, the Allied governments saw the potential risks, not from Germany, but from the diffusion of these secrets to hostile regimes or non-state actors, and locked away thousands of pages of technical schematics. Some were destroyed outright, others buried deep in NATO's classified vaults until recent decades. These 9 designs are more than just engineering marvels. They are lessons in human will, ingenuity born from desperation, and a grim reminder that survival often depends not on weaponry, but on adaptation. As we explore the next designs, keep in mind the scientific principles lurking beneath the surface, principles barely understood at the time, yet eerily predictive of modern survival science. We'll cover a bunker whose ventilation system used the physics of convection to filter out poisonous gases without any mechanical parts. Another disguised as a farmhouse with a secret escape tunnel only a handful of soldiers knew about, and a design that incorporated electromagnetic interference to block radio signals, turning it into a fortress of silence, not just from sound, but communication itself. These are not just stories. They are strategies tested under fire, validated by mathematical precision, and preserved now for anyone willing to learn from the past. When the grid fails, when governments collapse, or when disaster strikes, this hidden knowledge could literally be the difference between life and death. But that's for the next part of our journey. For now, you've seen how German bunker designs evolved far beyond simple stone and steel, how science, psychology, and desperation combined to create secrets so dangerous they were locked away for generations. Just remember, the true power of these bunkers was never the concrete or the guns inside. It was the human spirit's refusal to surrender, no matter how cold, how dark, or how lost the world above became. As the war dragged into its final desperate months, another design emerged that blurred the line between architecture and psychological warfare. In the winter of 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, German engineers devised what intelligence later termed the echo chamber. This bunker was not merely a shelter, but a deadly trap designed to turn sound against its enemies. Located deep within the dense forests near Bastogne, it exploited the natural acoustics of the surrounding terrain. According to declassified American intelligence briefings from 1948, the echo chamber was responsible for delaying the advance of at least 2 battalions by creating an auditory illusion of massive troop movements and artillery barrages where none existed. Survivor testimony from Sergeant James O'Connor, who was captured near that sector, described hearing an entire army's footsteps, guns, and commands coming from a single hill, a phantom battle cry that confused and terrified. The necessity for such a design stemmed from the Allied superiority in artillery and air reconnaissance at the time. The Wehrmacht's dwindling manpower forced them to leverage deception on a scientific level, weaponizing the environment itself. The bunker's construction incorporated a series of underground galleries and vaulted chambers lined with sound-reflecting concrete and hidden sound amplifiers powered by manual cranks, funneling noise outward in carefully calculated bursts. This created a soundscape that mimicked the noise of large troop deployments, making any assault hesitate, buying precious time. The survival rate of units using this tactic rose by an estimated 25%, buying time for reinforcements or escape. Today, the principles behind the echo chamber inspired modern sonic warfare and decoy tactics in electronic countermeasures. Understanding how to manipulate sound in hostile environments remains crucial for modern soldiers and survivalists alike. When the grid disappears and stealth depends on every sense, mastering sound can mean the difference between life and silent death. But even more technologically advanced was a design known only by its code name, Silent Fortress. Deployed near Hamburg in early 1945, this bunker incorporated electromagnetic shielding designed to block all radio communications both inside and outside. Military archives released in the late 1970s reveal that Silent Fortress used layered metal plating, combined with early versions of what we now call Faraday cages, to create a fortress of silence. The effectiveness was terrifying. According to an intercepted Wehrmacht message, entire units stationed inside were cut off not just physically, but electronically, impervious to enemy radio jamming or spying, but also burdened with complete communication blackout. This isolation was deliberate, preventing enemy signals intelligence from detecting command orders while also guarding the bunker's stealth. The necessity arose as Allied cryptanalysis and radio interception grew more effective, routinely uncovering German plans and troop movements. Conventional encryption was failing, so the Nazis opted to create zones of complete radio silence, but without disrupting internal communications. The execution involved running non-electronic message systems within the bunker, combined with acoustic communication corridors that allowed verbal messages to travel undetected by electronic sensors. The survival benefit was twofold: defense against infiltration and protection of sensitive information. Allied units described these bunkers as radio ghosts, impossible to infiltrate with conventional signals intelligence. Modern military installations and critical infrastructure use updated versions of this electromagnetic shielding to prevent cyber warfare and espionage. For survivalists today, understanding Faraday principles and electronic silence remains essential, especially as our lives rely on increasingly vulnerable technologies. One of the most disturbing secrets unearthed post-war concerns the bunker dubbed the Black Labyrinth, constructed beneath the town of Poznan in occupied Poland. This was not just a bunker, but a sprawling underground fortress extending over 2 hectares below the city's surface. Built between 1943 and 1944, it served as a command center and refuge for high-ranking officers. But what made it forbidden knowledge was its integration of toxic gas traps managed via cleverly concealed air pressure differentials. Documents declassified only in the early 21st century from Polish military archives detail how these traps could be activated remotely, flooding specific corridors with lethal gases to repel infiltrators or traitors. Nazi engineers masterfully designed ventilation systems that could control the flow of standard air while redirecting lethal gases without detection or leakage. The necessity arose from widespread fears of sabotage and espionage within German ranks, particularly after multiple assassination attempts on commanders. The execution relied on complex valve systems and chemical reservoirs hidden in what looked like innocuous wall panels, toggled by manual controls only known to select officers. The deadly efficiency of these systems was evident during several documented incidents, where suspected traitors and prisoners vanished without trace after being led into these corridors. The survival rate among the loyal occupants was remarkably high because they were trained to navigate the maze and avoid the gas zones using pressure sensors embedded in their uniforms. While chilling, this knowledge teaches a grim lesson about internal security and betrayal during warfare. Today, the principles of controlled toxic agent isolation inform security protocols in chemical weapons handling and emergency lockdown systems. For anyone venturing underground in hostile environments or seeking to build secure shelters, understanding air pressure manipulation is a vital, if somber, survival skill. Now turning to a design that was as much art as it was war machinery, the camouflaged cathedral pushed deception to an architectural extreme. Constructed amid the war's final months in the Rhineland, this bunker was cleverly disguised as a ruined medieval church, complete with broken stained glass and crumbling stone facades. Declassified British architectural intelligence reports from 1947 describe how this fortress fooled reconnaissance pilots and ground troops alike. with soldiers inside reporting that enemies often took cover inside the ruins, only to be ambushed or trapped by hidden steel doors and firing slits. What made this design powerful was its environmental blending, combined with trap mechanisms that only the defenders knew. Necessity arose from Allied aerial bombing campaigns, which turned open ground bunkers into death traps. German engineers answered by merging historical preservation techniques with military needs, employing salvaged materials from bombed-out cathedrals and old castles, repurposing iron window frames for lethal traps. Execution involved painstakingly recreating war ruins with precision, while integrating steel-reinforced chambers beneath the floor and thickened walls disguised by rubble. Entrance pathways were hidden under false floors accessible only through secret latches triggered by specific movements or weights. The survival rate for occupants was high because attacking forces wasted precious time navigating what looked like crumbling ruins, unaware that every shadow concealed a sniper or a trigger for a trap door. Post-war, this design influenced modern military urban camouflage and protective structures for cultural sites in conflict zones. For preppers today, it underscores the importance of blending shelters with the environment, using deception not just for concealment but for active defense. Another chilling innovation arose in 1944 in the Ardennes. The ice fortress, built entirely from ice and snow, but enhanced with steel reinforcements and innovative insulation techniques. At first glance, it seemed impossible, a glacier hardened into a bunker. Yet declassified American Army reports from 1946 confirmed that German engineers constructed these fortifications during Operation Nordwind to exploit the natural camouflage and extreme cold. The necessity was clear. Conventional materials were scarce, and the Allies heavily bombed supply caches, so survival depended on working with the environment. Ice fortresses created a paradox: warm interiors protected by thick ice walls that refracted artillery blasts and maintained stable temperatures. Execution employed a technique known now as icecrete, mixing crushed ice with cement and straw to create a material that was both insulating and structurally sound. The interiors were maintained above freezing by heat generated from underground geothermal vents and collected body heat, an early example of passive temperature control. Survivors recalled how the walls glistened in the blue light, creating a surreal subterranean igloo where soldiers could operate heavy artillery in near silence. These fortresses proved remarkably resistant to bombs, shrapnel, and even hand grenades, often repaired overnight in sub-zero weather. The survival rate in these installations was dramatically higher than traditional bunkers during winter campaigns, extending combat stamina during the blizzard conditions. Modern cold weather engineering principles for Arctic bases and ice roads borrow heavily from these insights. In grid-down crises in snowy environments, knowing how to insulate effectively and utilize natural refrigeration can save lives. Finally, one of the most astonishing designs was labeled the Lost Tower, a vertical bunker allegedly sunk into a mountainside near the Bavarian Alps. Unlike typical horizontal designs, this structure descended vertically over 50 meters underground, connected by a network of ropes, pulleys, and silent elevators. It was designed as a last refuge, self-sufficient, and nearly impossible to assault due to its narrow, vertical access points that could be easily defended or destroyed by the occupants. Military engineering blueprints, declassified in 1983, emphasized the tower's uniqueness. It incorporated shock absorbers to make it seismic resistant, a solar-powered air filtration system, and hidden compartments for food and ammunition. The necessity arose from sustained Allied control of surface routes, forcing defenders underground and pushing engineers toward vertical survival. Testimonies from officers stationed there speak of the psychological toll, but also of near-total safety from artillery, airstrikes, and infantry assaults. The execution involved repurposing mining technology, combining steel-reinforced concrete with advanced ventilation shafts camouflaged as natural vents. Survival inside this vertical fortress reached 75% during months-long sieges, an unheard-of figure in the war's late stages. Today, this concept influences modern high-rise secure bunkers and underground shelters designed to withstand nuclear and chemical attacks. For those interested in survival architecture, Vertical designs present a critical alternative, especially in mountainous or otherwise inaccessible terrain. What you've just heard is more than just wartime curiosity or relics from a doomed era. They are blueprints of a survival ethos forged in the worst imaginable circumstances. Every design here reflects a profound understanding that survival in war is as much about mental endurance, deception, and adaptation as it is about firepower. These German bunkers weren't mere shelters. They were embodiments of strategy, science, and human will. Yet behind every success story, countless lives were lost in harsh winters, sieges, and brutal combat. The men who built and occupied these places faced unimaginable stress, risk, and isolation, paying dearly for the secrets they preserved. Today, as the world stands on the edge of multiple crises, from geopolitical tensions to climate disasters, these forbidden bunker designs hold lessons for all of us. When the grid fails and traditional defenses crumble, the old ways of thermal insulation without fuel, water from air, silent communication, and camouflage shift from history to urgent necessity. Preppers, survivalists, and military strategists alike owe it to those forgotten soldiers to preserve and learn from this stolen knowledge. Because in extreme survival, what saved lives then can save lives now. And here's the final classified detail the Allies only revealed decades later. Several of these bunkers had silent, fail-safe, self-destruct mechanisms designed to erase all trace of their secrets should capture become imminent. Proof that what was hidden was feared not just by enemies, but by their own creators. Remember this: the power of these bunkers was never in walls of steel or weapons. They were in the minds who conceived them, and the courage to endure when all else was lost. Now that you know, it's up to you to keep these lessons alive, so history's darkest innovations can become tomorrow's means of survival.